Hi, Vivian.
Hi, Thiago.
I'm so glad to be here with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And welcome to season one, episode one of the New York Festivals podcast.
Wonderful. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for
Mhm.
having me, and I'm glad we get to catch up doing this.
Yeah, me too. So before we get into it, tell us who you are. Tell us a bit about yourself. I know you have all kinds of different experiences. So tell us where you're from. How did you get to this amazing position that you are in today?
I love how this is always the first question, but I find it to
Mhm.
be such a mind-boggling question. So big. So my name's Vivian Odior. I lead marketing for WhatsApp, and I've been doing that for the last 4 years of my career. In terms of where I'm from, originally born and raised in Nigeria. That's where I grew up. That's where I call home officially. I then also grew up in Dallas, Texas. So Texas is second home. And I have been a marketer for the better part of my career. I studied broadcast journalism, comms in school, and went out to do marketing post business school because I thought marketing was like a great way to like impact people and shape perception. So started my career at Johnson and Johnson. When it came to marketing, I did that for close to 10 years and got to touch just a ton of brands. I call that like the typical CPG school of marketing. And through that, just sort of like learned a love for global marketing. And that's what brought me to WhatsApp. And so that's what I do. Started here 4 years ago, as I said, and it was a dream then, continues to be a dream now. And I've gotten the pleasure of being part of really bringing the brand to life, making sure people understand what WhatsApp's about, giving it voice on a global scale, growing a team, and having fun while we're doing it. So that's who I am and how I got here.
That's amazing. And I love that you said it's a dream because like for that short period of time that you and I got to partner and help, that I was lucky enough to help you guys and your team build this brand in the beginning, it felt like a dream to me too. And I
Yeah.
think it speaks a lot to our personal experiences as well, because I think where you and your team are taking this brand, it's such an amazing place. And I think it's a brand that most people don't even think as a brand. At least I didn't, right? When I started working with you guys, I'm like, oh yeah, WhatsApp is a product. Like we have
Yeah.
to advertise it and sell it to people. But it's so ingrained in a lot of people's cultures. I'm from Brazil. Like it's a product that is just part of people's lives. You can't even book a dentist appointment without it these days. But a lot of people don't think about it. So how did you first approach it when you first joined the brand?
One, it was reconciling with that. When I talked to people or when I was recruiting people to my team, I was like, hey, look, we're talking about an app that has been in the hands of billions of people for years and continues to grow in terms of number of users, but people are using it day in, day out. And I think what I've told people is our big challenge as a marketing org is really taking the appreciation for WhatsApp from back of mind to front of mind. So when you're ingrained in that way, you're almost not thought of. And we needed to make sure that people recognize that we understand the privileged position we have in our users' lives. We're in their hands every day. To your point, we're part of intimate moments and big moments for people's lives. And we wanted to make sure we reflect that back to users and embrace that. So that's like really the first job to be done is if we don't shape the conversation around what WhatsApp is, we'd either be forgotten or our users are going to shape it for us. And I felt like it was very important for us to own that narrative. So that's how I really think about what WhatsApp's trying to do. And then how we do it, that's a different story. It's actually quite difficult, but a lot of fun as well.
And it's also difficult because it's essentially two different brands, right? Like Meta, obviously an American company, and WhatsApp being such a global force, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like I remember in the beginning when we were advertising WhatsApp globally versus
Yeah.
America, it was like treating this as two completely different brands, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think it speaks to the core of what this product is because it speaks to people that have a foot in each world a lot of the time, right? So tell us
Exactly.
more a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
I mean, look, all Meta products are global, so that's really great. But you're right. In terms of like where did they like establish themselves first? I think WhatsApp is one that truly it's actually outside in terms of gaining the user base, establishing itself, what it's known for, definitely outside the US, and now is gaining traction in the US. And in terms of what the product does, right? We connect users around the world in private spaces so that they can do all the things that they want to, communicate with those closest to them. And what we found, and what we ended up attracting even to the working team on marketing, where the people that are the biggest advocates of what WhatsApp is, or the loudest about the role that WhatsApp has played for them, are usually people who feel that WhatsApp has played a critical role in their identity and sense of self. And we call those people dual cultured, cross cultural people. When I look around my team, a lot of people relate to that. So while there's a good number of us based in the US, like myself, either born somewhere or we're an expat somewhere, there's just like a lot of your own personal life and identity you're trying to keep in touch with. And then the role of an app that makes it easy for you to connect to all those parts of yourself becomes that much more critical. And so we've been on a mission to have the most diverse marketing org in the world. But that also plays a role in how we market, because to your point, every market we're in thinks of us as a core part of that. And so if I'm doing something in India, doing something in Brazil, I cannot paint a holistic brush across those. Brazilians are like, this is my WhatsApp. And Indians are like, this is my WhatsApp. And I need a team and I need a perspective that allows me to pay honor to that and to make sure that I'm delivering on that on a great level for our users.
I mean, you can definitely see it in the work, but I would love to for us to dig a little bit deeper into what's going on behind the curtains. Because I remember, again, in my short experience working with you guys, I clearly remember one of the workshops that we did here in New York,
Yeah.
and you looked around the table and it was like maybe 12, 15 of us, and everybody was from somewhere else, either an immigrant themselves or first generation American. And it was so interesting because I've been in workshops like this my whole career. I've done this a million times, but there's something about those that felt weirdly cathartic and personal because
Yeah.
our workshops just basically consisted about on us discussing the human experience and human connections. And there was something so deeply personal about everybody's stories.
Yeah.
And then it's so amazing to see reflected in the work itself and the actual output a few months later. But how does that experience and how does working with this team, how does all that influence your personal style, your personal approach, and your leadership style?
Yeah. So, in terms of my approach to the team and my approach to like what do I try to bring out, because I actually found that like WhatsApp is such an endearing product and it's such a product that people personally feel so passionate about. You feel that come through in interviewing, you feel that come through when we're recruiting people to the team. So I feel very fortunate that I have a lot of people sitting at the table that I know feel I don't want to use the word indebted, but like WhatsApp is a critical part of their life, right? And so that, for the most part, first of all, makes it easy to elicit passion in the work, to help people feel more dedicated to like making WhatsApp succeed. And it also makes it easy for me to say, bring your personal experiences to the table, because when we're interviewing or we're talking, just like when we were chatting with you for all the work that we did, it's sort of like you had your own stories, you had your own experiences, and you're like, this happened and I had to reach out to this person on WhatsApp. So I think it makes the first part of my job easy, which is how do you make sure people feel passionate about the product itself, understand the role it plays in their life, and can actually be an advocate or a voice for what this job, for what the app is. And then in terms of generally how we lead, I think it's a great reminder when we're working to keep saying, okay, well, this is not, a San Francisco Bay Area product. This is not, an American product alone. Like it is for a global community. We reflect this global community. And so when we're talking about insights, when we're looking about executing an activation, I can pause and look around the room and say, okay, is this true here? Is this true there? And like we get all the stories. Or we'll be having casual conversation. And I love when someone uses an idiom or an expression and the team just starts repeating one another saying, well, where I come from, we would say this, and where I come from, we'd say that. I just think it brings richness to the conversation. And then finally, in the actual work itself, I think we never lack for either a universal insight that goes across many cultures and many groups, or we can be extra focused on a market and be that much more meaningful to that market because of the fact that we have that representation within the team.
Yeah, which is obviously a purely untaxed task, right? Because, like for example, I agree we have this thing that we call famously effective. Is the type of work that we like to pursue, work that drives cultural value and business value at the same time, right?
Mhm.
Which obviously easier said than done, right? So how do you, in your experience, you blend those two worlds to come up with something that resonates on a global scale?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's definitely not the easiest formula. And I would not go out telling marketers like it's simple. Do these one, two, three things, and you're going to make sure that happens. I think the first job you have to do as a marketer, especially as a senior level marketer in an organization, is find out what is the job you're being asked to do. It's usually tied to immediate business impact, tied to revenue. And you need to make sure you're solving that problem first and foremost. And you need to make sure you're doing it as creatively as you possibly can, because that will make it stand out. But I would encourage people to say, like, hey, if it's grow in this market or recover from loss or, defeat this competition, you make sure that you're doing that, squarely in the face. And sometimes there's room in that work for some of the cultural impact to take immediate effect, right? Like it's like, oh, you want me to grow in this market? There's this one cultural audience I can do. I can like maybe make that become the hero. But a lot of times it's a dual strategy that I call the hug and punch. So with the hug, it's like, what's my effective growth business impact strategy? How am I actually helping the organization achieve its goals? And then I start building the hug. And that is usually something that I want us to be known for in a more loving way that's winning hearts and minds, maybe less scientifically and less, with like claims and, effective product positioning, if that makes sense, and more about how are we making a difference in the world. And you start dialing that up slowly, right? You start paying sweat equity into that conversation. So for us, for instance, on WhatsApp, when I first started, it was just like, how do we make sure people understand our efficacy and our functional power of privacy while we start growing this global audience awareness of the fact that we really, serve multiple cultures and people can get us. And so we could do advertising that was privacy specific, and do work that was tied to there's no one like us and this concept of being dual cultured. And both of those platforms have grown over time and now have opportunity to mix and mingle, now have delight. And my company can look at me and say, I trust that you're going to do the right thing for the business. And I'm like, okay, now trust me when I mix my hug and punch together because I've earned that right. So that's really how I encourage people to think about it.
I love that notion of the hug and a punch. And just to dig a little bit deeper on that, like how do you go about identifying the right moments for it to be a hug or a punch? Like I'm assuming the punch is more like structure and you have more of a plan, whether it's yearly or whatever. And then, but for the hug moments, is it something that comes from within the organization and the brand, or do you identify stories outside in the world and go like, oh, that's a perfect WhatsApp story. Let's go tell that. Like, how does it work for you?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the punch to me, it's what you're signing up for in your business plan. It's what you're signing up for in your job description. It's really like, how do we make this brand or this app great? Like, how do we solve the current short-term issue that we need to solve? It usually has the higher budget, if I can be honest. It's usually more about winning in the marketplace immediately. And so you need to have a plan for it now in the short term. And, that's probably the 12 to like 15-week marketing plan that you have on a regular basis, kind of moving that functional win. The way the hug works, I think, is this is you doing your homework as a brand to understand who you are, who you want to speak to. And I've had it happen both ways, where I've gone in and intentionally said, this is the year I want to establish WhatsApp to be known for talking to this audience, and proactively sought out like, okay, a partnership. We partner with Giannis from the Milwaukee Bucks, and we, made him like the first face of WhatsApp to tell the story of dual culture. And that was like our first entry. And from then on, I would say what's happened since then is we've made friends in the industry, if you will. That's my best way of putting it out there. We've looked out for opportunities. We connect with people, we hear ideas, and we keep building in the background. How would we build on this platform? What else would we do? And when opportunity meets timing, we make it work that way. So it's like, if you stay ready, you never have to get ready. So we're very intentional about like, okay, we know we have financials to do like one big punch moment this year. Sometimes that's anchored on a big cultural moment like the Olympics or, like quote unquote Super Bowl. We've not done anything for a Super Bowl. I'm using that as an example. But a lot of times, we create the moment that we want to make that noise. And then because of that, all these other anchor opportunities show up and we kind of make a call on if that's the right time to execute.
So tell me more about the work that you guys did. I think it was 2 years ago at this point that I'm assuming was a hug moment for the brand. I
Yeah.
was I was in the entertainment jury this year at Cannes, and I was lucky to first of all meet you there and
Yeah.
congratulate you and your team for the award, but also see the work firsthand that ended up winning the Grand Prix. in the entertainment category at Cannes. So tell us more a little bit about that.
Okay, this is not me trying to be boastful. Which one won entertainment? Was it We Are Ayenda?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
That
I mean, this is kind of what I mean, for a long time with the punch work, it's like, hey, how do you hit people in the face with we're the most effective with privacy? But I think what we had started to do or land for the brand is also people could see the role we play in relationship building and the role that we play, like in the way that privacy affords great impact to one's life and authenticity in the way that you're able to be free with people. And so about 2 years ago, when we were working on our big privacy moments within our year, we saw an opportunity to tell the story of privacy. And we were approached to understand the story of the Afghan girls soccer team and how they had been able to escape from Afghanistan, in in 2016, really because of people's ability to help them escape through WhatsApp. So we're talking about young girls, 13, 14, 15 years old and younger, and their families who were being sought after because they were girls in sports and needed to escape for their lives. And the role that WhatsApp played in enabling them to find a route out of the country over the course of 30 to 60 days, where they were essentially living on the road and scouring through nights to eventually get on a plane and get out of the country safely, and are now able to play football, and try to represent their country the best they can. We just knew we had to tell that story. Up until this moment, we're like, hey, privacy, this is what you get for it. Now you really see the impact of privacy on people's lives. And we knew we could step out of being in the center of that story and just tell the story of the girls, because we had naturally played a role in that moment for them. And it paired so well with overarchingly our punch. And I tell people all the time, if I came to you and I said, let me tell you a story of freedom and how it enables people to reach their highest potential, that sounds way more exciting than like, let me tell you a functional story about privacy in a product. And that's what this was. And so we're very excited to tell that. We partnered with Farkunda, who is the coach who helped the young girls escape and continues to coach them today as they play in different tournaments. And she helped us understand how she corralled a number of people to help those girls escape. And we're very proud of that work. We're proud to have put a spotlight on that work. And we're hopeful that we will be able to continue to help those girls achieve what they need to achieve now that they've been given the opportunity to the next phase of life.
it's such an incredible story, and a story that doesn't exist without WhatsApp, the product and the brand. So kudos to you and the whole team for just, like I said, putting the spotlight on that, because it's such a powerful human story. And speaking of that, like going back to what you said at the beginning, that you worked on the two different sides of the marketing world, right? The quote unquote traditional CPG world and now the tech world. Like,
Yeah.
what are some of the differences, or is there a difference, or is it all about finding those powerful human stories, or and connecting the dots to your brand and your audience? How do you feel
Yeah.
about that?
As far as marketing and brand work goes, there really isn't a difference, except for this particular one, which I think was a hard one for me to fully grasp, right? I think with all marketing, especially as I was kind of growing up in CPG, the first thing you need to do is focus everything. Focus towards a target, focus your plans, focus your thinking, focus your actual brand. And when you come into a space like tech, that can feel a little foreign when you have projects that reach billions of people or that everyone uses. People feel like you're actually leaving things on the table when you focus, when you say, like, this is the only group I'm going to talk to, or this is who I'm building the brand for, because that feels a little counterintuitive to a tech organization, because they're like, no, we're actually building for everyone. We want the masses to use this. And so the biggest shift for me was, okay, in my mind, there are sub audiences that definitely are hyper-focused targets for a brand like WhatsApp. But the real focus and like kind of the real discipline that came in was being just sort of hyper-focused on one conversation. And for us, that was privacy. And yes, privacy had many different flavors, in terms of like privacy that affords realness, privacy that's like privacy features, privacy and authenticity, but that allowed us to establish or lean into the discipline that should come into a marketer's toolkit, because it was harder to do so on a targeting level. So that's a big difference. And then I would say, other than that, all the other things remain true. You need to build something that people love. You need to help people talk about it in a language that's, meaningful to them. I think today, more than in the past, you definitely need to tap into both culture and subculture. And subculture can be defined well beyond like ethnicity and like what's happening in like food, wine, tasting industry or fashion. It really is starting to tap into what are those interest areas or things that people are diving deep into for fun. So those have been the big things. I think overarchingly, though, making your brand meaningful is the job. And whether you're in consumer packaged goods or tech, that's the job you have to do.
Wonderful. And I like to believe that it's all about people, right? The people that you
Yeah.
surround yourself with on your team and also the people that you choose to partner with externally. And you mentioned at the beginning how you're in a mission to have the most diverse team in your
Yeah.
organization in the world. And I think also the people that you choose to be your partners externally, like you mentioned, Yanis, for example,
Mhm.
um, you always go for very, very interesting, unexpected partnerships, if I may say so myself. And I think what's your approach to that? Like, I would love to hear a little bit more from you. Like, how do you go about selecting those partners, both internally and externally, that align with your personal values, but also with the values that make sense for the brand? Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly the fact that you use values is very telling. We try really hard to make sure that if we're going to partner with someone to tell a shared story, that shared values exist. It's one thing when you plaster a face on your product or into your advertising as a way to get reach and to make sure people see it and like they buy it. But for us, a lot of our partnerships are really about, hey, you have something we want, we have something you want. How do we come and we both have a thing that we want to do for the world, right? How do we come together and do that together? And if we're going to work together and expand together, that really does mean we need to have shared values. So in the case of Giannis, is the interesting thing is like, his team actually approached us initially because he was very adamant about not working with brands or apps unless he actually used them. And then as we started talking about what we could do, I think it was a delight to him and it was a delight to us to learn that neither of us were just interested in saying like, go around, hold your phone up and say like, I use WhatsApp. It was, hey, you have a very specific story about, hardship, but also gaining something in life, respecting your elders, like growing up with family, immigration, staying connected to the things that ground you and keep you rooted. And also just working hard. And that's like a life lesson that we can leave in the world for young people. But it's also something for us as a app where we know so many of our users, like these are the values that they're grounded on. And we talked about those cultural crossovers who really have lived in multiple places or holding on to legacy and multi-generational learnings, like this is the stuff that just like feels embedded in who they are that they don't get to talk about enough at mass. And we said, do you want to join us talking about this and like leaving that out there in the world? And that's where that came to be. And it meant it was probably a lot more work because we had to creatively think about doing that. It's not as simple as lifting up the product and saying, hey, I use WhatsApp. And and I think it really required a lot more creativity from the teams we worked with to figure out how to package that and tell those stories. And so we look for people who are willing, who want to go deeper and have those shared values of especially leaving something in the world and leaving impact behind in what they do.
I love that. And another recent example, I think is probably maybe the first, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe the second season that you guys partnered with Lewis Hamilton, who, by the way, was in a podium yesterday. So shout out to
Yeah.
Lewis. But even somebody like him who's um, covered in logos, right?
Yeah.
All the time. Like his uniform is literally covered in logos. His car is covered in logos. But you guys always find an unexpected way to partner with somebody like him in a way that makes sense. And like you said, has a clear message, right? And it leaves something to the audience that is more than just exposure. It's more than just a spokesperson. It's somebody that represents certain values. So I really respect and admire that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that partnership's actually with Mercedes AMG
Mhm.
F1 team. And
Mhm.
through that, we get to tell stories with their drivers. And Lewis is in his final year with Mercedes. And so that was exactly the same. We did a film called Push Push, where it was the focus was really, how do we leave something behind for people to learn from? And that was very exciting for us to do together.
So in terms of values and your experience, what kind of advice would you give to somebody that's maybe just starting their careers, or maybe not? Maybe they've been doing this for a few years, but feel like they haven't accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. Like, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Yeah. I mean, I think one, treat your brand like it's got a person behind it. What would you say are the values of the brand? And make sure that you understand that and are making choices every day that like lives into and walks according to those values. And then I think you can push yourself to understand, how do I bring those values to life, using the five senses. And I think keep doing that exercise of writing that out. Like, hey, what is surprising about the values of this brand? What is interesting about the values of this brand? What is unexpected? And have I shared that? I think you might know it, as the marketer or the team that's sitting on the inside, and you might assume that you've been somewhat explicit, but there's probably more opportunity for you to share it in an enriching way and in a lasting way. And I think the first couple times you're going to do it, it's probably not going to be huge. It might not reach, it might not go viral to like 20 million people immediately. But I think building the muscle and starting somewhere will get you to that greater opportunity where you are telling that story on a larger scale and to a big stage.
Love it. And in the tech world, technology, AI, now it's all the rage. Everybody keeps talking
Yeah.
about it, and technology is going to continue to disrupt the way we do everything. Um, Especially for somebody like you that's working for a tech brand, how do you balance that sense of innovation, and progress, with the responsibility of just empowering communities and sticking to your values and all the things that we've been just talking about? How do you balance both worlds?
Yeah, I make this correlation to when I was looking for my new opportunity, when I was leaving Johnson Johnson and going to WhatsApp. I remember specifically people were like, how'd you make the decision to move to tech? And I was like, honestly, I don't think I really crystallized that was the decision I was making. I genuinely, as I thought about what I wanted to work on next, I said, I love things that are global. I like products that really feel embedded in people's daily lives. And I wanted, from a business perspective, to be on the side of an inflection point, right? Either before something fully is scaled or before it expands into the next generation of itself, or until they figure out like a monetization strategy. I was like, I want to be on one side of the fence for that, to be part of that growth, right? And so that's how I made that decision. And WhatsApp stood out to me because for me, it was definitely a daily tool. I was living in Dubai at the time, and I was like, this is the only way I'm connecting with my family. So people must love it as much as I do. And so I made a choice based on what good I felt this product did in the world. And now marketing it, I think first about what good I think the product does in the world. And as we layer in innovation in our company, AI being one of them, I definitely think foremost from, how does this further that good? How does this further that impact versus, this is a new technology tool and it needs to get out there and it needs to grow, if that makes sense. And I think both from how how myself and my team shape and push, exactly, the role that like AI plays within our app, to also how much we shoulder the responsibility and the understanding that like through our app, we know that AI is going to be in more hands than through most other apps, just by the sheer size that we are. I think we think a lot about, how is it making, driving more utility for our users? How's it helping you answer the right questions? How is it fostering better connections for you by filling in the blanks, giving you information and empowering you? And so I say all that to say, I think the first thing to try to understand about the products that you have is not, are they built on a technology platform, but truly, what do they do? What do they facilitate? What do they foster? And then make sure that the technology, as it advances, continues to foster that human thing, and doesn't take away from that human thing. And I think that's just like a richer way to think about it and look at it. And I feel fortunate because I believe that WhatsApp, being grounded in a space of connection, is grounded first and foremost in a space of humanity. And so therefore, technology can only further that.
And it's funny how, like, these days, I feel like culture has been evolving just as fast as tech, right?
Yeah.
It's not like in the beginning, I think, of this conversation, I think it was easier for brands to rely on the human aspect of it because that felt like more of a cornerstone of society when
Yeah.
tech was evolving very fast. We could always rely on that to be sort of like a unifying factor. And
Mhm.
now I feel like culture is evolving in so many different directions in such a crazy speed, just like tech is. So how does a brand navigate that these days? Like, how
Yeah.
do you think, especially for a brand like WhatsApp that all over the world, but especially in America, talks to a very diverse audience, like people who have multiple, like multicultural, multi-race
Mhm.
types of individuals that are very much in the spotlight, the cultural spotlight these days. How does a brand navigate all these cultural shifts, in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've been hearing, and I think I'm twisting this definition on its head, so forgive me, but I keep hearing this phrase and it really sparks a flame in me, which is like subculture eats culture for breakfast. And it's not to demean culture. Culture is really powerful and really important. But one of the things that I've seen really rise to the top is people's interest in things and books and film and content and skating and makeup and just like how people are rallying towards the things that make them uniquely them, their hobbies and their interests and the things that really light them up. And they're building, in my opinion, a subculture around that. I often talk to my team about how, like, I find myself getting a PhD in the things I consider fun. I'll read a book and then I want to listen to a podcast about the book. And then I want to go to a conference about the podcast. And then I want to go to like an event that where I get to dress up like the characters from the book. And it's that is such a unique way in to delighting people and connecting with people that I think that so many brands might be overlooking when in reality, that's what they facilitate. For me on WhatsApp, I'm like, hey, fandoms happen here. Like when you connect around something, this is the group, this is where you come to connect with the right people that have that same interest. You build better friendships around those same interests and you build, your whole world around that. And I think I'm really pushing or hoping that brands continue to take hold of that and become both the power engine for helping people embrace those subcultures and those interests that really make them come alive. And they find ways to tap into those spaces authentically. I think that that's really the opportunity here.
Absolutely. I think curiosity is the name of the game. And
Yeah,
that's why I keep
I love that.
repeating the mantra that I keep repeating to my team. And that's how I try to live my life is just trying to be as open-minded as possible.
What
Because I
does that
think
mean
that
to you, actually? I'm curious.
that means I think curiosity is the raw material for advertising, honestly. Like because we get to work on so many different brands and so many different things at the same time. Like no one day is similar to the other. So I think you're almost forced to remain curious
Yeah.
if you want to evolve, if you wanted to constantly be at the top of your game. And it just so happens that in hindsight, this is not something I made a conscious decision
Mhm.
about, I think. But in hindsight, I think I have a natural curiosity to my own personality that kind of lends itself naturally to advertising. So I kind of stumbled upon this career where um, that I have this propensity to just be curious about certain subcultures, to your point, and just that happens to be the source material for a lot of good advertising. So
I
I
agree.
think if you look at a lot of the work that we've done together at WhatsApp and all of the other work that I've done in my career in the past, it always came from finding cultural tensions, for lack of a better word, and trying to, instead of like trying to use advertising to create culture, because I don't think that's a thing anymore with the fragmentation and all those things,
Mhm.
is try to identify through the use of just being curious about your brand, just using curiosity as a tool to identify the cultural tension that's happening around your brand in the industry that your brand operates in, and then trying to convert that conversation into attention for the brand, right? That's really how I approach things. I believe that we're in the conversion business these days,
Yeah.
conversion of that tension into attention.
Hmm.
And I think curiosity is the name of the game in that sense. You have to be curious to be able to identify those cultural tensions and have a certain instinct. I don't think that comes from numbers. I think that comes from instinct and being curious enough to learn that language around your brand and like learning how your audience experiences that brand to then be able to convert that tension into attention. So that's just my experience with it. Does that make sense?
Really powerful. No, it really does. And I
Mhm.
think it's like, hey, you're curious, but seeing it through is where the payoff is, right? Like go learn a little bit more and you find a place to anchor, or you find something that's growing or lacking. And I think tension can get a dirty rap because it can sound completely negative, but it's just really like I think of tension as like where's the opportunity area. And so I love
That's
that.
a better way to frame it. Yes. Amazing.
Yeah.
I think we reached a natural end to our conversation,
Awesome.
Vivian.
Well, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.